so you can see from my best practices, a single pay station for parking here, an outdoor cafe, benches, the trash cans that I talked about. This becomes the zone where you put that stuff, because in many places you don't have room for it now. Unifying, if possible, street lamps and traffic signals on a single pole, cleaning up the clutter a little bit, which will be part of the streetscape project. Opportunistically finding places to put plantings, both as a placemaking strategy, but also to deal with stormwater management, potentially, et cetera, et cetera. There's also a way to deal with also potentially bus stops as well. So for each of these conditions, we made a kind of menu, you know, a menu of options that for future grant funding would be a useful kind of illustration when the city and Matt's organization packages these grants up. That we, in a way, this is a demonstration of what we do and how we're ahead of the curve in terms of how we would do this. So this is not an actual design, it's the menu that we would present as part of that implementation strategy, if that makes sense. So now I'm going to show a primary intersection. These are key because they link back to the park to the east. They also provide those key view corridors with a kind of green view at the end. They also are part of a larger structural logic in terms of how transportation works in this part of the city. Here the strategies aren't much different. I mean, we just diagrammed them again. I mean, it has to do, again, with maybe larger curb extensions because we want more things to happen there. These have to be more carefully negotiated with truck turning radii because some of these streets are streets where trucks also need to get from X, Y, and Z. So we haven't done that part of the planning yet, but we're aware for the primary intersections that's an issue. Now I'm not going to go through these again, but it's got our same kit of parts identified, called out here, and then the kind of menu of pieces that come together. And then the parking pedestrian interface, we think from a quality of life standpoint is very important. Again, I said that it's a good thing that the surface parking lots are scattered across the corridor. It means that there's a nice grain of car pedestrian interface, and we're not against cars, by the way. One of the things that's nice about Acushnet Avenue is that you get people driving slowly and you get pedestrians in a good mix, actually. So these little parking lots are actually very useful. But they can probably be enhanced visually. So we've diagrammed the parking lot here, and we have a couple of ideas. One is a very simple idea that we catch the stormwater before it leaves private property and it goes to the city streets with either absorbent plantings there or pervious paving, but we slow down stormwater flow so that it's not a continuous sea of asphalt and concrete. This shows some plantings maybe along there to deal with stormwater flow. But maybe more attractively, that's combined with low wrought iron fence-looking fences that create a better demarcation between the public realm of the sidewalk and the parking lots. And this is used fairly successfully in some places downtown as well. But that edge actually matters quite a bit to make that just a better sidewalk. So these were part of our recommendations. And that might include some enhanced plantings where you can't park anyway. There's a funny nook in the parking lot where you can't get a space. It's a great place to get some more landscaping. So that's what this is showing. So again, like the the intersection types, we've created a menu of strategies for these conditions that, in a way, are there to pick and choose from. And so this is the menu for that interface between the parking lot and the sidewalk, which we think is critical as other property owners consider parking lots or not, which for many of you is probably important for your business, right? If you can't have parking in the back, you've got to have parking in the front. And so, as a conclusion to this, we have a kind of simple before and after, which I think is fairly successful. This is the existing condition. You can see, again, the curves are exactly straight. I made it black and white for your enjoyment. And then this is an overlay showing the curb extensions coming out to narrow down those intersections, to create those neck downs. Again, it makes it, I think, a much better pedestrian scale environment. Bicycles show up, shoppers, the fence along the parking. So it's got as many of our kind of kit of parts in there as possible, just to show as an illustrative how it might look. And then the last piece of this, where we got a little bit more creative maybe, was how we thought about the gateway, the threshold into the district coming from the south, which is an image that even matters for visitors coming into New Bedford coming off 195, right? Which is, you can actually see this from the interchange, and even from the highway, especially when you're traveling up the hill headed west. And one of the things that's been on the table for a while, I suppose, we've heard this from some of the people we dealt with in the city and through people in Matt's office, is shouldn't there be a gateway there? You know, literally a gateway that announces that you've arrived into the neighborhood. And so we did a little bit of research until we found out the Fall River already has one. You probably already know that. There is in San Miguel in the Azores a kind of famous gateway. So when we were doing our early research, we were looking at maybe some cultural touchstones that might make sense until we realized that it's already been done. And it might not fully express the variety of people that live in the neighborhood and the aspirations of all of you for what this might be. The other precedent that I knew about, because I've been in Columbus, Ohio recently, was that there were these series of gateways over the Short North District that was like the arts community in Columbus, Ohio. It was the only other large-scale archway that we could find that had been a kind of economic development success. I don't know why they have 20 of these, but I guess the grant funding worked out well. I don't know. But it was based on a historic structure that had been there at one point. And at night, they light up, and it creates a kind of place out of the street. And you have right here some examples of similar kinds of structures that span the street. For example, here, the Earl Street Gateway. What we came around to was something more spectacular had to happen here. And something that might also be more flexible for temporary installations that might last a season, maybe 2 years. It might even involve the community in the selection of what the piece was. And it's somewhere between the kind of holiday lights that are put up. You know, even at our office at Downtown Crossing in Boston, the holiday lights are up now right out of our window. And the kind of art installations that the contemporary artists are doing that deal with the same kind of phenomenon. This is an artist that we like, Janet Eckelman, who makes these fantastic fiber optic installations that seem to float in the middle of the air like UFOs. And Elizabeth, who's working on this with me, used to work with Janet and turned us on to this. We thought it was pretty cool. So here's our what if, which is, what if there was a Janet Eckelman floating over the intersection to announce, you know, the district? I hope you're laughing in a positive, supportive way. And so we decided to actually try to solve for this, which is, how would you create the infrastructure, the art infrastructure for making this happen? What we came up with were what are utility poles, but they're actually for art. They're art poles. And the art poles are located so that you could do an installation like Janet Eckelman's or anything else, and they were flexible enough that you could run power up there, you could structure things off of it. It could be a low-tech holiday display, it could be more ambitious, and we would seek grant funding for this infrastructure. Not the art piece itself, but the poles themselves, with a series of options that would demonstrate that this would be good for the community as an ongoing public art piece. And so we literally worked it out. And so you have your own version of these things at a smaller scale, obviously. And so there's a precedent for this. They are attractive even when festivals aren't happening. We're doing the supersized version of these things. We like the idea of doing tapered wood things for some reason, because we're designers. We can occasionally make arbitrary decisions. And we began to figure out where they were best located for rethinking the interchange itself, which is that we could make Acushnet Avenue two-way and redirect traffic so that it's safer here. We began to develop a logic about where these art poles should go. Does that make sense? And so again, this is speculative design thinking to see if we could actually work it out. And the logic was that we wanted this to be visible both coming from the south and coming from the north. We wanted it to be wide enough that we'd also appreciate it coming from the east or west. So it's kind of, we've thickened the gateway to make it visible from a whole series of directions. And we did a series of perspective studies to test to see how cool it would look for any possible direction, including coming off and on the interchange. And so these are just little tests about how it would look. And so that's what we did. So here's the current condition. This is on a very hot day, you can see. It was 190 degrees. Here it is at night. And then, this is how they would sit and structure something over the top of it. So we have a lot of ideas for this, maybe running an art competition. We've talked to a few people in the state about this. There's some interest in it. We think it would be pretty cool, we hope. And so this was against our very pragmatic streetscape project, an idea that we had that we decided to kind of take for a test drive. So I wanted to finally talk about how we might get this done. Again, this is the study area. I think the current thinking is to break this up into 4-phase projects of approximately that number of linear feet of streetscape. And I'm going to leave this project off the table for a minute. It's kind of a separate thing. But it'd be great to roll it into phase 1 if that's the first. I mean, the phases can be, we can fight over which phase happens first, but it would be nice if we could get that project tied into this phase. And I want to now give you a sense of how we started to think about conceptual pricing for the streetscape project. It has to do with other projects that we're doing, streetscape projects, to give you a sense of how much a linear foot different levels of fanciness of streetscape design might cost. We're doing the reconstruction of Broad Street in downtown Boston right now, which is what I would call super fancy because there's lots of subsurface complexity, there's lots of stakeholders there. This is on the high end, $3,600 a linear foot. And this is City of Boston, I'll say no more. The improvements to JFK Street in Cambridge by the City of Cambridge, which was all nice, new brick sidewalks, new street lamps, you know the flavor of this, $2,500 a linear foot. And then to go back in, this is Dunster Square, Harvard Square, we're working with an engineering firm that had all these recent numbers. To go back in and do patch and repair of existing brick sidewalks to make them nice, put the new handicap ramps in, is about $1,000 a linear foot. So I don't know where we are with this in terms of pricing, but we have had some discussions with the city and with Matt's organization about some ranges of costs to let you know that in terms of thinking about grant funding, ballpark costs that are at a broad range, that there's some serious thinking now about how this might actually roll out, if that makes sense.